Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This session is a custom one built specifically for our listeners over at the Peak State podcast. And our mission today is to get right to the heart of what's biologically required for, well, peak human performance.
And before we jump in, just our standard protocol. Everything we're about to discuss is for educational purposes. It's based entirely on the source materials we were provided. We're here to synthesize the science, not give out any personal advice.
Okay, so today we are digging into something that I think most people, myself included, have just completely underestimated. It's the biological imperative of social connection. For so long, we've kind of treated social life as a luxury. Something you get to after you've got food and shelter sorted.
Yeah.
The cherry on top.
And that model, that whole hierarchy, is just fundamentally flawed for our species. The consensus now across neuroscience, biology, all of it, it's clear. Homo sapiens are what's called an obligatorily gregarious species.
Obligatorily gregarious, so that's not a preference.
Yeah. Not at all. It's a physiological need. Social connection is, in fact, the default strategy our bodies use to achieve physiological safety.
So we're basically flipping the definition of a basic human need on its head. Our mission here is to pull together all this research from evolutionary psychology, social neuroscience, epidemiology, to really show that connection is non-negotiable.
Right. It's the foundation for your physical health, for your cognitive longevity, for your psychological stability. You literally cannot achieve a peak state without what you could call social fitness.
So we're going to peel back the layers on this. We'll start with the hardware, the social brain, and see how evolution actually built us for groups.
Then we'll move to the psychological software, that fundamental drive to belong. After that, the actual mechanisms of co-regulation in the brain. And then we have to look at the deadly cost of being isolated.
And finally, that modern paradox. Why we're so connected, but still so alone. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. You mentioned this inversion of the model. Most of us, we learned about Maslow's hierarchy in school, that pyramid with air, water, and safety at the absolute bottom.
Exactly, and love and belonging were a few rungs up.
So, based on the sources, why is that old view just not holding up anymore, at least for humans?
Well, it fails because it treats the human as a self-sufficient, solitary unit. And that's just not what the biology says. For us, social connection is the strategy for safety.
How so?
Think about the ancestral environment. An isolated human was a dead human. You couldn't defend yourself from a predator. You couldn't secure a large meal. You were, frankly, prey.
Right. So even today, in our safe modern homes, if you remove someone from their group, what happens to their biology?
The whole system interprets it as an immediate existential threat. It defaults to a state of, let's call it metabolic inefficiency and threat hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance. So you're constantly on alert.
Constantly. Your brain starts pouring resources, glucose and oxygen, into its threat detection pathways. It's exhausting. It wears down your cells. It prevents deep rest. Our first and most important survival problem wasn't finding food alone. It was coordinating with each other.
It makes perfect sense. And it brings us right to the main theory for why we have these ridiculously big brains. The social brain hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
From Robin Dunbar.
That's the one. And it challenges the older idea, the ecological intelligence model.
Which was the idea that we got smart to, make tools and find fruit?
Basically, yeah. That our big brains evolved to solve non-social problems. Navigating, hunting, that sort of thing. But Dunbar's research, looking at all these primate brains, found that the size of the neocortex, that's the smart part. It doesn't really correlate with those ecological challenges.
So what does it correlate with?
Almost perfectly with the size and the complexity of that species' typical social group.
Wow, so the conclusion is we're not smart and therefore social.
It's the other way around. We are smart because we are social. The cognitive demands of managing social life are what drove our intelligence through the roof.
Okay, let's get into that. The computational cost. Why is being social so hard on the brain? What is it actually doing?
It's doing a ton of work, constantly. I think of it like running a very complex, real-time simulation of your entire social world. First, you've got identity tracking. You need to know who's who. Hundreds of faces, voices, personalities.
Okay, that's one.
Second, you're constantly monitoring alliances and hierarchies, who's up, who's down, who's friends with whom today. It's fluid.
And third, you mentioned this is maybe the hardest part, is managing reciprocity.
Oh, it's incredibly taxing.
Yeah.
You have to remember not just who helped you, but who helped other people, and more importantly, who's a freeloader, who cheats the system.
So you're not just cracking one-to-one relationships, you're tracking this whole web of favors and debts between everyone in the group.
Exactly. Who owes what to whom? And finally, number 4 is impulse inhibition. You have to constantly suppress your immediate selfish desires for the long-term benefit of staying in the group. All of that takes a huge amount of brain power.
And that processing load has a limit, which brings us to the famous aha nugget here, Dunbar's number.
Exactly. Based on the size of our neocortex, Dunbar calculated that the cognitive limit for a stable, integrated social network is about 150 people.
150. And what's so amazing about that number is just how consistently it shows up all through human history.
It's everywhere. The sources are full of examples. It's the typical size of Neolithic villages. It was the size of a Roman army cohort. You see it in Hutterite communities, which actually split up on purpose when they get to about 150 to maintain cohesion.
Even in modern companies, right?
Yes, Gore-Tex is a famous example. They build a new factory once a plant gets over 150 employees.
Yeah.
Any bigger, and you start to lose that internal trust and efficiency. You need formal rules.
Okay, so if you're managing a group of 150, you need efficient communication. And for other primates, that's physical grooming, right?
It is. Physical grooming is a very effective one-on-one bonding tool. It releases endorphins, it reduces stress, but it's wildly inefficient.
How so?
As a group gets close to 150, the math just breaks down. You'd have to spend something like 40% of your waking day, almost half your day, just grooming each other to maintain the bonds. You'd starve. You'd get eaten. It's impossible.
So language evolved to be a more efficient form of grooming.
Vocal grooming, that's the term. It lets you groom multiple people at once. You can share information, reinforce a bond, tell a story, all while you're, say, fixing a tool.
And crucially, it allowed us to talk about people who weren't there, which is gossip.
Right. And we have to strip away the negative meaning we have for gossip now. Evolutionarily, it was a critical social tool.
A tool for what? What was its function?
It was a form of social auditing. It was essential for monitoring reputations and enforcing what's called reciprocal altruism. It's how we managed risk.
Let's unpack that. Risk pooling.
Okay, so think of hunter-gatherer groups like the Hadza or the Ache that are mentioned in the sources. Hunting is a boom and bust business. One day, a hunter gets lucky and brings down a huge animal, way more meat than his family can eat before it's spoiled.
So if he keeps it all, most of it goes to waste.
Right. And next week, he might get nothing and his family starves. But if he shares that meat widely with the group today, he's basically stored that food in the bodies and reciprocal obligations of his friends.
Ah, so he's creating a social safety net. He can call in that debt when he's the one who comes home empty-handed.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And gossip is the mechanism that keeps track of who is a reliable sharer and who isn't. It maintains the integrity of that system.
Which puts the intense pain of betrayal in a whole new light. Being cheated wasn't just an insult.
It was a direct threat to your survival. If you were cast out as an unreliable partner, you were on your own. So our brains evolved these powerful emotions, shame, righteous anger, to make sure we take reciprocity very, very seriously.
And this social hardware, it isn't just in our skulls, it's literally on our faces. The social face hypothesis.
Yeah, this is fascinating. It's the idea that our faces and our facial processing parts of the brain evolved together in a kind of arms race. Compared to other primates, our faces are unique. We have incredibly complex and fine-tuned facial muscles.
For thousands of expressions.
And we have highly visible sclera.
The whites of our eyes.
Yes. That high contrast makes it incredibly easy to see where someone is looking, even from a distance. Our faces are basically high-definition, rapid-fire signaling devices.
Signaling what?
3 main things. Rapid threat detection, you see fear on someone's face and you're instantly on alert. 2, emotional contagion, which synchronizes the group's mood. And maybe most importantly, ambiguity resolution.
What do you mean by that?
Imagine a group member accidentally drops a heavy rock near your foot. Was it an accident or was that a threat? A quick glance at the micro-expressions on their face tells you everything you need to know about their intent. It resolves that life or death ambiguity in a fraction of a second.
So if our brains are optimized for this rich, multi-channel data stream, the face, the eyes, the tone of voice, the takeaway is pretty clear.
Face-to-face interaction is the gold standard. It's the only thing that gives our ancient neural hardware all the data it needs to feel safe and connected.
Okay, so that's the hardware. The why. Now let's get into the psychological software, the drives that actually push us to connect. And that starts with a need to belong hypothesis.
Right. This is the foundational 1995 work by Baumeister and Leary. And their argument was revolutionary at the time. They said belonging isn't just a nice feeling. It is a fundamental human motivation, just as powerful and necessary as hunger or thirst.
And for it to be fundamental, It had to meet some really strict criteria. Let's walk through them. The first one is universality.
Yeah, if it's fundamental, it has to be everywhere, and it is. The drive to form and keep stable, positive relationships is in every single culture ever studied. You just don't find societies where people choose to be alone.
Okay, so it's universal. What's the second criterion? Ease of formation.
We are bonding machines. We form connections incredibly easily, even under terrible conditions. Think about soldiers in a trench or hostages. Strangers thrown together in a crisis often form intense, lifelong bonds very quickly,
The brain is just desperate to build a support network.
urgently. And number three is the flip side of that, resistance to dissolution. We hate breaking bonds.
We experience so much pain and grief, even when a relationship ends. That was honestly bad for us.
Exactly, even abusive ones. That resistance shows just how deeply our biology values a connection, any connection, that was once perceived as a resource. The system just doesn't want to let go of a potential safety line.
The fourth point is about where we focus our brain power, cognitive priority.
This is a big one. Our brains prioritize social information. You'll remember a social slight or a compliment far better than a random fact, and the research shows we spend the vast majority of our idle time thinking about our relationships, replaying conversations, planning future ones. Our minds are socially obsessed.
And finally, number 5, satiation. This need isn't a bottomless pit.
That's right. Unlike, say, a desire for money, the need for belonging has a limit. Once you have a core group of high-quality, reliable relationships, and that number often looks a lot like Dunbar's inner circles, maybe 5 to 15 people, the intense drive to go out and make new friends actually decreases.
You're socially full.
You're satiated. And the implication of all 5 of these points is massive. Social exclusion isn't just hurtful. It's a state of profound biological deprivation that triggers a massive stress response, leading to real pathology, anxiety, depression, a weaker immune system.
So from that general drive, let's zoom in on our most important bonds through the lens of attachment theory. This is more than just about babies and parents, right?
Oh, much more. At its core, the attachment system is a threat regulation system. That's its job.
To manage alarm.
To manage alarm. When you perceive a threat, could be a noise in the dark, could be a stressful email, the system activates, and you get this primal urge to seek proximity to an attachment figure.
A spouse, a best friend, a parent.
Right, and if that person is available and responsive, you get what's called felt security. Your nervous system gets the all-clear signal, the alarm bells turn off, and you can calm down. If they're not available, the alarm keeps ringing.
And that's where the insecure attachment styles come from. You have hyperactivation.
That's the anxious style. They cling, they amplify their distress to try and keep the attachment figure close, because for them, distance equals danger.
And then you have deactivation.
The avoidance style. Their system has learned that reaching out is pointless or painful, so they shut the need down. They try to be radically self-reliant, which, as we've said, is incredibly metabolically expensive.
And that long-term cost is the key for peak performance. The insecurely attached are constantly burning through their own resources to stay calm.
That's it. They show much higher HPA axis reactivity, bigger, longer cortisol spikes in response to stress. They are forced to self-regulate alone, and that constant effortful regulation drives premature aging and disease over a lifetime.
Which brings us to the final piece of this section. The direct link between relationships and just happiness.
It's the strongest link there is. Decades of research asking what makes a happy life point to one thing more than any other: social relationships. It is the single strongest predictor.
There's that study on very happy people. What was the key finding there?
Diener and Seligman looked at the happiest 10% of people, and they found that the one thing every single one of them had in common, the necessary ingredient, was rich and satisfying social relationships. They just could not find a happy loner.
And then there's the big one, the Harvard study of adult development. Over 80 years of data.
Unbelievable study, and the director summarized it all in one sentence. The quality of your close relationships was a better predictor of your physical health at age 80 than your cholesterol levels were at age 50.
Let's just sit with that. Better than cholesterol.
Better than cholesterol. We track all these clinical numbers, but the data says the quality of your human connections is a more powerful predictor of whether you'll have a long, healthy life. Loneliness kills. It's that simple.
Okay, so if relationships are that critical for our health, we need to understand the mechanics. How does a brain actually work differently with someone else around? This brings us to James Cohen's social baseline theory.
Yeah, SBT is a really radical idea. It basically says we've had the brain's default setting wrong this whole time. The standard view is that the brain is baseline when it's alone. Cohener argues, no, the human brain evolved to assume social resources are present. That's the baseline.
So being with trusted people is the brain's most efficient natural state.
Exactly. And isolation is the dangerous, costly deviation from that baseline.
And the mechanism for that efficiency is this idea of load sharing.
Right. Regulating yourself is hard work. It burns a lot of energy, staying warm, staying vigilant for threats, managing your emotions. A social network distributes that load. You outsource the work. If you're alone, you have to do 100% of the threat scanning. In a group, you can relax a little. Someone else has your back.
And the evidence for this is it's mind-bending. It's not just a metaphor. A friend's presence literally changes how you perceive the physical world.
The Hill study, it's incredible. The brain calculates the effort required for a task against the resources it has available. SBT predicted that the brain would include a friend's resources in that calculation, and it did. Subjects who were standing next to a close friend literally perceived a steep hill as being less steep than those who were alone.
That's not a feeling. They visually saw it as less steep.
They saw it as less steep.
Yeah.
The brain decided the challenge was smaller because it had more resources available to meet it.
Wow. And this shows up in fMRI scans when people are faced with an actual threat, right?
Yes, the electric shock studies. When people are alone and anticipating a shock, their brain's threat centers, the amygdala, the insula, they light up like a Christmas tree.
And what happens when you introduce that social buffer?
When they're holding the hand of their spouse, the activation in those same threat regions is massively reduced. It's not that the brain doesn't see the threat, it does, but the safety signal from the touch tells the system, we can handle this. No need to go into full-blown panic.
So that's the social buffering hypothesis in action. It's the brake on the stress system.
It's the neural brake. The normal stress pathway is amygdala activation, HPA axis, cortisol release, social support, a comforting touch, a soothing voice, activates the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC.
Okay, the VMPS.
And the VMPFC has direct inhibitory connections to the amygdala. It's the higher order brain telling the primitive alarm system to stand down. It physically applies the brakes.
It's the all-clear signal.
It's the neurological all clear, and the chemical messenger that carries that signal is one we've all heard of.
Oxytocin. The cuddle hormone.
We call it that, but its role is much deeper. It's a powerful anti-stress hormone. When it's released during positive social contact, it binds directly to receptors in the amygdala and hypothalamus and just shuts down the production of stress hormones. It's the chemical confirmation of safety.
Which all ties perfectly into Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. This is like the wiring diagram for how this all works.
Exactly. Porges identified the myelinated ventral vagus nerve as a unique mammalian superpower. It's this complex nerve that links our heart rate regulation, what he calls the vagal brake, directly with the muscles in our face and head that control our voice and eye contact.
So my heart rate and my ability to make eye contact are physically connected.
They're part of the same circuit, the social engagement system. Its job is to rapidly downregulate our defenses. When you hear a calm, melodic voice or see a smiling face, that signal travels down the ventral vagus and literally slows your heart down. It engages the vagal brake and shifts you out of a defense mode and into a mode of connection.
And if that system gets disrupted by threat or isolation,
then you're stuck in your older, more primitive defense systems, either chronic fight or flight, which is anxiety, or a total shutdown, which looks a lot like depression. Our ability to feel safe literally depends on getting that rich social data stream.
the case is building. Connection is a biological necessity, which means its absence, loneliness, has to be seen as a serious medical risk factor.
It has to be treated as a major public health crisis. The sources are emphatic on this point. It's on par with things we take very, very seriously, like smoking.
And the data for this comes from a huge meta-analysis by Holt-Lundstad. What was the scale of that study?
It was gigantic. They pooled the data from 148 different studies with over 300,000 participants in total. And the headline finding is just staggering. People with stronger social relationships had a 50% increased likelihood of survival over the study period.
50%. That's not a small effect. Let's put that risk into context because the comparisons are what really drive this home.
They are. The mortality risk from chronic social isolation was found to be the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
15? Wow.
It's also equivalent to being an alcoholic. And here's the one that gets a lot of people. The mortality risk from social isolation is greater than the risk from physical inactivity and greater than the risk from obesity.
So we spend billions fighting obesity, but here's a risk factor that's even deadlier, and we barely talk about it.
It's a massive blind spot in public health.
So let's get into the neurobiology of what's happening. The work of John Cacioppo is key here. He made a really important distinction.
A critical one. The difference between objective isolation, just being physically alone, and subjective loneliness. The painful feeling of being disconnected. And the research is clear. It's the subjective feeling that's the real driver of the pathology. It's the gap between the connection you want and the connection you have.
And when you feel that gap, the brain kicks into an ancient survival mode. What does that look like?
It's a state of chronic defense. It starts with an attentional bias. The lonely brain is hypervigilant for social threats. It unconsciously scans every interaction for signs of rejection. A neutral expression is interpreted as hostility. A pause in conversation is a sign of disapproval. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And that vigilance carries on even when you're trying to sleep.
Oh, absolutely. It leads to sleep fragmentation. The brain feels unsafe, so the threat detection systems never fully power down. You have dozens of tiny micro-awakenings all night long. You might not even know they're happening, but they prevent you from getting the deep, restorative sleep you need for your brain and body to repair itself.
And the body is also physically preparing for a fight that never comes.
Right. Through increased vascular resistance, your blood pressure goes up. The cardiovascular system is in a constant state of readiness for physical action, which over years and decades leads to hypertension, heart disease, and stroke.
And finally, there's the direct damage to the brain itself, the link to cognitive decline.
Loneliness is a neurotoxin. The data shows it increases the risk of dementia by around 30%, and Alzheimer's specifically by even more. And we know why. There are 3 clear mechanisms.
Okay, what's the first one?
Simple loss of cognitive reserve. Social interaction is the most complex workout you can give your brain. You're decoding tone, humor, intent. It's high-level processing.
Yeah.
When you're isolated, those neural circuits they atrophy. It's use it or lose it.
And the second one is inflammation.
Yep. That chronic stress state upregulates inflammatory genes. You get this low-grade, simmering chronic inflammation all through your body and brain, and we now know that neuroinflammation is a key driver of the amyloid plaques that are the hallmark of Alzheimer's.
And the third mechanism is the stress hormones themselves.
The constant bath of cortisol is directly toxic to the brain, especially the hippocampus. That's your memory and learning center. So the very feeling of being unsafe and alone literally causes the parts of your brain responsible for memory to shrink and wither.
Which brings us to this huge modern paradox. We have more ways to connect than ever before in human history. We are hyper-connected. And yet, loneliness in an epidemic, what is going on?
It's because our ancient hardware is being fed a low-quality signal. Evolution prepared us for rich, multi-sensory, face-to-face connection, and our digital tools systematically strip out the very cues our biology needs.
Okay, let's list them. The digital deficit.
Yeah.
What are the crucial cues that are missing?
Well, the big one is physical touch. That's the primary trigger for oxytocin. Then you have true reciprocal eye contact, which is essential for that ventral vagus activation. You don't really get that on a video call.
The cameras are in the wrong place.
Exactly. Then there's the full spectrum of vocal prosody, the melody and rhythm of speech, which gets flattened out or lost in text, and even subtle chemical signals, things we're not even conscious of. All of that is just gone.
So these digital interactions are like low-calorie versions of the real thing.
That's a great way to put it. They're good for transmitting information, but they often fail to trigger that deep neurochemical cascade that tells your body you are safe, your tribe is here. So the need to belong is never truly satisfied.
This sounds like what the researcher Wendy Gardner called the social snacking phenomenon.
That's the term. It's any behavior that gives you a quick, temporary hit of connection without any real substance. Things like scrolling through old photos on your phone, rereading nice text messages, or, and this is a big one now, forming intense parasocial relationships.
With a YouTuber or a streamer, you feel like you know them, but they have no idea you exist.
Right, and it's the perfect analogy. It's like eating a sugary snack. It kills the immediate hunger pang of loneliness for a moment, but if that's all you eat, you end up with social malnutrition.
I see. So there were these two competing ideas about social media, right? The displacement hypothesis versus the stimulation hypothesis.
Correct. Displacement said online time pushes out real-world time, making us lonelier. Stimulation said it helps us maintain and organize our real-world friendships.
And the research now says it depends.
It depends entirely on how you use it. The key is the active versus passive divide.
Explain that.
Active use, direct messaging a friend, commenting, sharing, having a back-and-forth conversation, that tends to support the stimulation hypothesis. It reduces loneliness because it's reciprocal. You're using the tool to actually connect.
And passive use.
Passive use, which is just lurking, scrolling endlessly through a feed. That's where the damage is done. That supports the displacement hypothesis. It lacks reciprocity, and worse, it triggers massive upward social comparison.
Everyone's life is better than mine.
Precisely. You're watching everyone else's curated highlight reel, which just feeds feelings of depression and loneliness and makes you want to withdraw even more. It's a vicious cycle.
So the bottom line is our brains need that reciprocal multisensory input to check the connection box and turn off the alarm bells.
We are running ancient software designed for the richness of a Pleistocene campfire on a modern, low-resolution digital feed. And our bodies know the difference. Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, let's bring all these threads together. What we've looked at today, it proves that a social life isn't a hobby. It's not a preference. It's a non-negotiable biological imperative. It's woven into our evolution, into our very cells, our stress response, our immune system, our cognitive health. It all depends on social integration.
The evidence is just overwhelming. The brain registers social pain in the same regions as physical pain for a very good reason. Because for our ancestors, being cast out meant death. And that ancient wiring is still there. That's why loneliness is a chronic stress state that degrades our bodies and our minds and carries a mortality risk that's greater than obesity or smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
The singular conclusion from all of this research has to be that we should treat social connection as a vital sign. If you are serious about achieving a peak state of health and performance, you have to monitor your social nutrition with the same care that you monitor your blood pressure.
Absolutely. If that 80-year Harvard study is right, that the quality of your relationships is the single best predictor of your long-term health, then the most powerful health intervention available is to prioritize high-quality, reciprocal, face-to-face time. The science is clear. The secret to the good life isn't complicated. It's that good relationships keep us happier, healthier, and alive for longer.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to take into your week. Given everything we've talked about, the powerful benefits of physical proximity, of actual eye contact, of that full multisensory experience that calms your nervous system, ask yourself this. If social fitness is just as vital as cardiovascular fitness, what one high-quality, reciprocal, multisensory connection will you make or prioritize this week? It's time to go beyond the social snack and invest in a full, nourishing meal.
An excellent focus. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into your source material.
We look forward to synthesizing your next batch of sources.